Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The United States has declared it will begin blocking all ships entering or leaving Iranian ports starting Monday. This comes after peace talks in Pakistan ended without an agreement. The South Korean government says it will continue to maintain its emergency economic response system. The authorities plan to maintain emergency meetings at a top and senior level and check affected items on a daily basis. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has been ousted, with the opposition securing a landslide election win, ending his 16 years in power that included repeated clashes with the European Union while maintaining closer ties with Russia. Attention is now turning to how election winner Peter Magyar will reshape ties with the EU and Western allies. We begin this morning with the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. Washington has declared it will begin blocking all ships entering and leaving Iranian ports from Monday morning, U.S. time. Iran has warned that such action will be met with deadly whirlpools in the Strait of Hormuz. This comes even as both sides project openness to further talks after their first round of peace talks failed. Our Oh Soo-young has the latest.
U.S. forces will begin blockading maritime traffic in and out of Iranian ports from Monday after negotiations between Washington and Tehran broke down in Islamabad. In a post on X on Sunday, the U.S. Central Command announced that measure, saying that the blockade will be enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas, including all Iranian ports on the Arabian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. CENTCOM, however, clarified its forces would not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. The maritime measure follows the failed 21-hour talks in Pakistan between U.S. and Iranian delegations. U.S. President Donald Trump said Iran refused to give up on its nuclear weapons ambition and declared the U.S. would soon begin the blockade. He added he had instructed the Navy to intercept vessels paying passage fees to Iran and that the U.S. would soon begin destroying mines laid by Iran along the strait. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Command warned against any wrong move in the strait, saying military vessels that intend to approach the waterway under any title or pretext will be considered a ceasefire violation and will be dealt with severely. However, Washington and Tehran appear to be open to further talks. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian reportedly told Russian President Vladimir Putin that a deal with the U.S. is not out of reach if, he says, the Trump administration abides by international law. Trump told Fox News Sunday Morning Futures that Iran hasn't left the bargaining table, and he predicts Tehran will come back to give the U.S. everything it wants. Experts say the failure of the first round was perhaps expected, but should not lead to escalation.
Neither side may have wanted to give the impression that they came to an agreement too quickly. They could be opening themselves up for criticism at home that they may have given in too much or too easily. So in and of itself, that is not necessarily the problem. But if on substance they remain this far away from each other and there is escalation simultaneously, that certainly doesn't bode well.
In the meantime, Oman has called for an extension to the 2-week ceasefire set last Tuesday to allow more time for the US and Iran to continue dialogue. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
So the United States and Iran have failed to reach a deal after 21 hours of high-stakes talks in Pakistan over the weekend. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Mason Ritchie, Professor of International Politics at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Ritchie, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says Iran is choosing not to accept U.S. terms, while Iran says it did not expect a deal in the first meeting. What are the main points of disagreement between these two sides?
Yeah, so, obviously, Vice President Vance, has a certain way of framing this to blame Iran for the failure of this negotiation. Negotiations are rarely a question of one side accepting another side's terms, except in case of absolute surrender, which may be what the U.S. wants, obviously. So we saw Vance, Steve Witkoff, a real estate developer, and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and also a real estate developer, met with their Iranian counterparts, including the foreign minister in Pakistan and Islamabad. There was no agreement reached. This was not a surprise. First of all, you could consider this the first round of negotiations. Frequently this is not going to lead to something anyway. But also, more importantly, I think there's still significant distance between the two sides' positions. And the main sticking point that seemed to come out of it, really two of them, were in the first place, very immediately, what would happen with the 440.9 kilograms of Iranian enriched uranium at a 60% level, which would in theory allow a production of 9 to 12 nuclear warheads. And then secondly, Iran's desire to continue or to impose a toll in the Strait of Hormuz. There are other areas that are also, under a significant contention, including Iran's, larger nuclear program and its regional role as a problem for instability in the Middle East region.
Right, and after the talks fail, President Trump is now saying the U.S. will block the Strait of Hormuz. What happens next? Where does the conflict go from here if a deal isn't reached before the two-week ceasefire ends?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Iran's already saying that, if this blockade goes through, that would constitute essentially a violation of the ceasefire anyway. The U.S., would argue that Iran has itself also violated the ceasefire in the hours and days after the ceasefire announcement took place. So we are going now into a period where the United States seems to be arguing that the Navy, the U.S. Navy will blockade entrance to and exit from Iranian's ports and begin at least some type of operation towards some of the demining parts of the Straits of Hormuz. The question, of course, especially with respect to the blockade, is whether or not Iran will react kinetically. Will they fire missiles or rockets at U.S. naval ships? And if so, would they manage to hit them? And if so, what would happen there? So there's obviously a significant escalation risk there. What one would, I think, hope, and probably one can imagine this is the case, is that both sides, both the U.S. side with the blockade and the Iranian side with its response, both rhetorical and otherwise, would essentially be trying to gain leverage for a second set of negotiations to come up in the future. And let's just hope that the ceasefire manages to hold until they can get that type of meeting scheduled.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. And Israel and Lebanon, they're also planning to hold negotiations in Washington. How do you think those talks will play out?
Yeah, I should be careful here because I'm not really an expert in either Israel or Lebanon, to be bluntly honest with you. But my understanding is that in significant degree, those negotiations are partially in support of the larger U.S.-Iran ceasefire. So, if the ceasefire itself between the U.S. and Iran, doesn't hold, it's questionable what type of value the Lebanon-Israel talks would have. They are still scheduled to meet in Washington, with the U.S. being, I believe, represented by its ambassador to Lebanon, Israel by its ambassador to the U.S. And I think we're not sure who the Lebanese representative is going to be. There, the stakes are, from Israel's perspective, trying to defang Hezbollah, push them back from some of the areas along the Lebanon-Israel border. I'm not exactly sure what Lebanon wants out of the situation, but I think, more generally, as I said, that this particular set of talks was in part supposed to be about supporting the ceasefire more broadly, since the Iran-U.S. war has escalated not only vertically, but also horizontally to encompass other countries in the region.
Right, I see. And U.S. intelligence agencies have reportedly obtained information that China may have sent missiles to Iran in recent weeks. So is China playing a more active role in this war?
Yeah, that's very difficult to say. My first reaction when I saw that was, okay, that's perhaps not a surprise. If anything, it might have been a bit of surprise that hadn't been happening in some capacity already. Maybe not finished systems being sent to Iran, but at least the components that would allow Iran to construct them. I've seen other experts in the U.S. who've cast some doubt on that. And so I'm actually not sure where to come down on that. Unfortunately, not many of us have the privileged access to that. I would say, it would not surprise me that would be the case, not only because China may think that it's to its benefit to support at least a sort of nominal ally, or at least a nominal strategic partner and perhaps get the United States further embroiled in a quagmire in that region. But also this might be a play from China to get some leverage over Trump in its upcoming meeting between Trump and Xi, which is still as of now scheduled for next May. So that might be a part of the tactic or the strategy on the part of China as well.
Right. All right, Professor Ritchie, thanks so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And South Korea will continue to maintain its emergency economic response system following the collapse in talks between the United States and Iran. Now, that's according to Blue House spokesperson Chun Woo-soo on Sunday after an emergency economic meeting. The meeting was presided over by Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Yong-bum, where officials assessed that great uncertainty lingers surrounding the local economy. They expect it to take significant time for Middle East countries to restore logistics and energy facilities even after the conflict ends. The authorities will maintain emergency meetings at a top and senior level and check affected items on a daily basis. Hungary's opposition Tisza party has won a decisive election win, ending Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's 16-year rule. The result signals a major political shift, with Peter Mazar poised to reshape ties with the European Union and Western allies. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Hungary is set for a major political shift as the opposition Tisza party has won the general election, ending Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's 16-year hold on power. The party is led by Peter Magyar, a former Orbán ally who broke away from the ruling Fidesz party in 2024. Orbán conceded defeat less than 3 hours after polls closed on Sunday, calling the result painful in a race marked by intense campaigning and unusually high voter engagement.
Dear friends, the election result is not final yet, but it is understandable and clear. The election result is painful for us, but clear. The responsibility and possibility of governing was not given to us. I've congratulated the winner. I thank you for all the great work.
Turnout reached a record 77.8%, significantly higher than in previous elections, signaling strong public demand for change. With around 72% of ballots counted, projections show the Tisza party securing roughly 138 seats in Hungary's 199-seat parliament, giving it a commanding majority and a clear mandate to govern. The outcome could mark the end of Orbán's long-standing push to reshape Hungary into what he called an illiberal democracy, a model that often put Budapest at odds with its Western allies. Over the years, his government has clashed repeatedly with the European Union over rule of law issues, while maintaining closer ties with Moscow. European leaders are watching closely for a potential reset in relations with Brussels, while the shift could also influence support for Ukraine, an issue where Orbán had frequently broken ranks with EU partners. With Peter Magyar now posed to take power, attention turns to how quickly his government will move to realign Hungary's foreign policy and restore ties with key allies in Europe and the United States. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
BTS has made U.S. music charts history as their 5th studio album Arirang sits on top of the Billboard 200 for a 3rd consecutive week. According to Billboard on Sunday, the album held off strong competition from Morgan Wallen's I'm the Problem and Ye's Bully. This marks the first time any K-pop act has spent 3 weeks at #1. The previous best was 2 non-consecutive weeks, achieved by the soundtrack to K-pop Demon Hunters. The Billboard 200 ranks albums based on overall consumption, including physical sales and streaming. With this milestone, BTS also becomes the first group in 13 years to spend 3 weeks at #1. And South Korea has resumed the tourist train service to Dorasan Station, the closest railway station to North Korea, after more than 6 years, raising hopes for renewed inter-Korean connectivity and exchanges. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
South Korea on Friday resumed its tourist rail service to and from Dorasan Station, close to the DMZ, after a suspension of around 6.5 years. A symbol of inter-Korean cooperation, the station was established at a summit in 2000, following an agreement to connect railways. Freight trains once passed through Dorasan, transporting goods to and from the Kaesong Industrial Complex until operations halted in 2016 amid rising tensions. After serving as a tourist destination, it closed in late 2019 due to COVID-19, until this Friday marked a full resumption of regular tourist rail service. The unification minister and passengers alike agree that this resumption can be the first step toward peace.
The Korean Peninsula is the only place where a border is sealed with barbed wire. This railway, built under the Kim Dae-jung administration, once carried materials to Kaesong. Today is about dreaming of that era again.
My son's dream is to travel to Europe by train. Unification may be a distant goal for now, but I hope we can reconnect, travel back and forth freely, communicate, and resume exchanges.
The train travels along the route connecting Seoul Station, Unjeong, Imjingang, and Dorasan Station, allowing passengers to travel beyond the civilian control zone. At Dorasan Station, the minister once again underlined the importance of dialogue and cooperation between the two Koreas for the future.
Hostility between the two Koreas serves no purpose. Peace, coexistence, reconciliation, and cooperation are the only paths to shared prosperity. We will lead the way by recognizing and respecting the North first, and by putting peace into action, not just words.
Through May, the service will run once daily on the second and fourth Fridays, with a maximum of 120 passengers on board per trip. Starting in June, it will operate 4 times a month, running every Friday. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Facing the tough reality of higher flight fares and fewer flight options, more Korean travelers are returning to domestic destinations, especially with a program that covers up to half of their travel expenses. Our Park Gun-woo has the details.
One of the latest travel trends in Korea is visiting lesser-known rural towns through so-called half-cost trips. Under the policy, solo travelers can get half of their total spending, up to around $70 reimbursed, while groups of 2 or more can receive up to around $135. That's provided as a mobile gift certificate that can be used locally or in the region's online shopping mall after verifying their actual visit with photos and receipts of what they spent. What started as a local initiative in Gangjin-gun County 2 years ago has now expanded into a government-backed program spanning 16 cities and counties starting this April. Those areas include Pyeongchang-gun County, Jecheon City, Namhae-gun County, and Wando-gun County, among others selected from 84 applicants. In Jecheon, all 10,000 travel vouchers were sold out within the first hour.
We used to worry about attracting repeat visitors, but through this program, we expect more people to return to the region. With financial support, visitors are also likely to spend more and stay longer.
The program is also receiving positive reactions beyond those who signed up.
A lot of people want to travel these days, and with high fuel surcharges making overseas trips more expensive, programs like this are especially attractive.
But some say better promotion could encourage even more people to explore smaller cities.
I like traveling to smaller towns, but I wish it were easier to find detailed information. If there were more things to see and do, I'd be more likely to visit.
One expert says creating original content will be crucial for local regions to attract more visitors and fully benefit from the program.
To encourage longer stays and repeat visits, regions need stronger content and storytelling. Otherwise, the financial support may only result in one-time visits. That's why local governments should support private firms to develop innovative programs and attract more investment, particularly in accommodation.
He added that actively attracting talent from outside the region will be key, rather than relying solely on local efforts to build a more sustainable tourism system. And with 4 more areas set to be selected through an open call later this year, more local regions are expected to see a boost in vitality. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday made an appearance in southern Lebanon, standing among Israeli troops inside what his military calls a security zone on Lebanese soil. Speaking on video surrounded by soldiers in balaclavas, Netanyahu said the war is not over and his forces have more to accomplish and are actively doing it. The Trump administration has pressed Netanyahu to scale back its attacks and open negotiations, warning the strikes are threatening the fragile U.S. Iran ceasefire. Despite that pressure, Israeli strikes continued on Sunday, killing at least 35 more people, according to Lebanese authorities. Nigerian military jets on Saturday night struck a market in the country's northeast, killing more than 200 people. The strike hit Jili Market in Yobe State, near the border with Borno, a region long at the center of a Boko Haram insurgency that has killed thousands and displaced millions. The Nigerian Air Force said it had been targeting Boko Haram militants in the area and has since activated a formal investigation into the civilians' casualties. A local councillor told reporters that over 200 people lost their lives and many others are injured. In Haiti, at least 30 people have died in a stampede at the La Ferrière Citadel. The stampede on Saturday during an annual celebration at the 19th century UNESCO World Heritage Fortress was made worse by heavy rains. Haiti's Civil Protection Authority warned the death toll could rise, noting that students and young people were among the large crowd gathered for the event when the disaster struck. The crew of NASA's Artemis II capsule was reunited with their families in Houston, Texas on Saturday after splashdown off the coast of Southern California the day before. The 4 astronauts had spent nearly 10 days in space following the first manned trip to the vicinity of the moon in over half a century. The capsule sped through Earth's atmosphere at 32 times the speed of sound before parachuting into calm seas at 5:07 p.m. Pacific time in what was described as a bullseye landing. The mission also broke the human spaceflight distance record set by Apollo 13 in 1970, traveling 406,000 kilometers from Earth.
It's a mild and sunny start to the week, with spring heating up quickly across the country. But mornings and evenings are nicely breezy, with large daily temperature swings of around 15 degrees Celsius or even more in many places. So you'll still need a jacket early and late in the day. This warm pattern will continue for now, with daytime highs staying around 25 degrees Celsius here in the capital, about 7 degrees higher than seasonal average, feeling more like late May or early June. And this afternoon, Seoul and Gwangju will be getting up to 25 degrees Celsius. Daegu will be topping out at 24 degrees under mostly sunny skies with clean air quality nationwide. But have your sunblock and sunglasses ready. Spring sunshine might be too strong for some parts. Looking ahead, rain will return to the south coast and Jeju Island tomorrow, lasting into the following day for Jeju. Then another band of rain is expected for Jeju and the southern regions on Friday.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.